Have you ever noticed how easy it is to remember everyone else's favorite things? You know exactly how your spouse likes their coffee. You know your teenager's favorite restaurant. You know your best friend's birthday. You know everyone's schedule, everyone's allergies, everyone's appointments, everyone's dreams, everyone's problems. But if someone stopped you today and asked, what brings you joy? Would you know? Not what you're good at, not what you do for work, not what everyone expects from you, not what you're responsible for. I'm asking what lights you up? What makes you feel alive? What makes you feel like you? For a lot of women, that question is surprisingly hard to answer. And it's not because you're selfish. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you failed. It's because along the way, while you were busy becoming everything everyone else needed, you slowly stopped becoming someone you knew. You didn't lose yourself overnight. You lost yourself one small decision at a time. One yes when you wanted to say no. One dream postponed because someone else's needs felt more important. One responsibility after another until one day you wake up and realize, I don't even know who I am anymore. If that's why you are here today, I want you to know something before we go any further. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are certainly not the only woman who has ever felt this way. Today isn't about blaming yourself. Today is about finally understanding something that most women will never realize. Because the real reason you keep putting yourself last has nothing to do with being selfish. It has everything to do with identity. I'm Keisha Reveal, and I help women become the person they were created to be so they can create a life, so that they can create lives that reflect who they are and not who the world told them to be. And around here, we don't believe transformation starts with changing your habits. We believe transformation starts with understanding yourself. Because you can't intentionally build a life that reflects who you are if you've forgotten who that person is. This video is the very first episode in our new journey together. We're beginning with Act One of the Life Purpose Makeover, Knowing Me. Because before we can talk about your relationships, before we talk about your purpose, before we talk about your values, we have to answer one question that changes everything. Who are you? Not who you have become, not who people expect you to be, not the roles you play, but you. And today, we're starting off with one of the biggest obstacles standing in the way of answering that question: why you keep putting yourself last. By the end of this video, I don't just want you to understand why this keeps happening. I want you to see yourself differently because most advice tells women just put yourself first. It sounds simple, it sounds empowering, but have you noticed if it were really that simple, you would have done it already? So maybe, just maybe, that isn't the real problem. Maybe the problem is that you don't know how to choose yourself. Maybe the problem is you've become disconnected from the person you're trying to choose. And that changes everything. Because here's today's life purpose makeover principle: you can't prioritize someone you've lost. And I want you to sit with that for just a second. Not because it's meant to make you feel guilty, but because it might finally explain why every attempt at self care, every planner, every morning routine, every promise to yourself keeps fading after a few weeks. Maybe you've been trying to take care of someone you no longer know. And if that's true, then the answer isn't trying harder. The answer is finding her again. You know what's interesting? I've heard women say things like, I know I need to take better care of myself. I just need to set better boundaries. I need to learn to say no. I've said that a few times myself. I need to make myself a priority. And while all of those things sound good, I've noticed something. Most women already know those things. You don't need another Instagram post telling you to take a bubble bath. You don't need another motivational quote telling you to love yourself. You've heard it all before. So let me ask you something. If the advice is so good, why doesn't it last? Why do you promise yourself that this time will be different, only to find yourself 6 weeks later doing exactly what you've always done? Have you ever noticed that? Because I have. And the answer isn't what most people think. The problem isn't lack of information. The problem isn't that you don't care. The problem isn't even that you're bad at setting boundaries. The problem is you've been trying to solve the symptom without understanding the source. Imagine walking into a doctor's office because you've had a headache every single day for 6 months. Now, imagine the doctor never asks a single question. He doesn't ask when the headache started. He doesn't ask what else you've been experiencing. He doesn't even try to understand what's causing them. He simply hands you a bottle of pain medicine and says, take 2 every morning. Would your headache go away for a little while? Maybe. Would the real problem still be there? Absolutely. And I think that's exactly what we've done with women. We've handed them self care, we've handed them boundaries, we've handed them productivity planners, morning routines, gratitude journals, meditation apps, vision boards. And hear me, because none of those are bad. And I actually believe many of them are incredibly helpful. But if you don't understand who you're trying to take care of, those things become a temporary relief instead of a lasting transformation. Because behavior follows identity always. You can force behavior for a season, but identity determines what becomes natural. Can I ask you something? When was the last time you made a decision simply because it reflected who you are? Not because someone needed something from you, not because it was expected, not because you felt guilty, but because it reflected you. Take a second and really think about it. If that question is difficult to answer, you're not alone. And that doesn't mean that you failed. It simply tells us we need to begin. Let me paint a picture and tell me if it sounds familiar. Your alarm goes off. Before your feet even hit the floor, you're already thinking about everyone else. What needs to get done? Who's depending on me today? What bills are due? Who's got practice? Who has an appointment? What do I need to cook tonight? You rush through the morning. You answer texts before you've even had your coffee. You solve problems at work. You smile through meetings. You listen to everyone else's frustration. You leave work, pick up groceries, come home, cook dinner, clean the kitchen, fold a load of laundry, help someone with homework, answer one more phone call. Then, around 9:30, 10 o'clock, the house finally gets quiet. You sit down on the couch, pick up your phone, scroll without seeing anything, and just for a moment, everything stops. Not because you finally have peace, but because you don't even know what to do with yourself when no one needs you. Have you ever noticed that? You finally have a moment to yourself, and instead of enjoying it, you almost feel uncomfortable. Because somewhere along the way, you've become so accustomed to taking care of everyone else that you lost touch with what you enjoy. That's not selfishness, that's disconnection. And here's what's heartbreaking: most women don't even notice it's happening because it doesn't happen all at once. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly lose yourself. It happens so quietly, so gradually, that by the time you notice it, years have gone by. And that brings us to something I don't think we talk about enough: You don't lose yourself in one big moment. You lose yourself in thousands of tiny moments. Moments that by themselves seem insignificant, but together they slowly shape your identity. And once we understand how that happens, everything starts to make sense. Here's what I want you to hear. You didn't wake up one morning and decide, you know what? I think I'm going to lose myself today. That's not how it happened. You didn't intentionally stop mattering to yourself. You didn't make a conscious decision to forget your dreams. You didn't choose to become the last person on your own priority list. It happened much more quietly than that. One decision at a time, one season at a time, one role at a time, one expectation at a time. And because each decision seemed loving or responsible, or even necessary, you never questioned it. Maybe it started when you became a mom. Suddenly, someone else depended on you for everything. Maybe it happened when you became a wife or when you became the dependable daughter, the one everyone calls, the one who always says yes, the one who always figures it out. Maybe it happened at work. You became the employee everyone could count on, the fixer, the problem solver, the one who stayed late, covered shifts, never complained. None of those things are bad. In fact, many of them are beautiful. Serving people is beautiful. Loving your family is beautiful. Being dependable is beautiful. But here's the question: at what point did serving everyone else require abandoning yourself? Because those things are not the same. Somewhere along the way, our identity became attached to being needed. And when identity becomes rooted in being needed, starts to feel like proof that you matter. So, if no one needs you, you almost feel guilty resting. If no one needs you, you start looking for something to fix. If no one needs you, you wonder if you're being productive enough. Not because you're lazy, but because your identity has quietly shifted. Let me ask you something else. Let me ask you something that might feel a little uncomfortable. Who are you when no one needs anything from you? Not the job, not your title, not your children, not your spouse, not your ministry, not your business, not your responsibilities. Who are you? That's a hard question. Not because you don't have an answer, but because you've spent so many years answering everyone else's questions that you stopped asking yourself your own. I think one of the biggest lies women unknowingly believe is this: if I keep giving enough, eventually there'll be something left for me. So you give your time, your energy, your attention, your patience, your creativity, your compassion, your emotional capacity, and you keep telling yourself after this season, once the kids are older, after this promotion, after this project, after things slow down, then I'll focus on me. But life has a funny way of replacing one season with another, one responsibility with another, one demand with another. And before you know it, 10, 15, 20 years have passed. Not because you made bad choices, but because you never realized what those tiny choices were costing. I remember talking with the woman who told me something I'll never forget. She said, Keisha, I was cleaning out my closet and found an old box from college. Inside that box were journals, pictures, poems she had written, paintbrushes, a half finished sketchbook, ticket stubs from places she traveled, little pieces of a woman she used to know. She looked at me and said, I don't even recognize her anymore. That wasn't because she stopped being creative. She didn't stop being curious. She didn't stop dreaming. Those parts of her were never gone. They were simply buried underneath years of survival. And I wonder, how many women watching this video have their own version of that box? Maybe yours isn't in a closet. Maybe it's in your heart. Maybe it's an old dream, a passion, a gift, a part of yourself that you haven't visited in years because life kept demanding something else. Let me tell you something. That woman isn't gone. She's been waiting, not for permission, not for the perfect season. She's been waiting for your attention. And that's when I realized something that completely changed the way that I connect with women. We've been asking the wrong question. The question isn't, how do I start putting myself first? Because that's too far down the road. The better question is, how do I reconnect with someone I've become disconnected from? Because think about it. You naturally prioritize people you know. You remember what they love. You remember what hurts them. You notice when they're tired. You protect what's important to them. You make space for them. Why? Because you know them. So, why would you expect yourself to naturally prioritize someone you stopped knowing? And that's why today's principle matters so much. You can't prioritize someone you've lost. Read that again in your mind and let it settle. Because maybe for the very first time, you're realizing that this has never been a self care problem. It's been an identity problem, and identity always comes before behavior. Now, before you think, well, I've lost myself, now what? I want to be very clear about what I say next because this is where so many women become discouraged. The moment they realize they've become disconnected from themselves, their first instinct is to try and fix it. So they start asking questions like, how do I become confident? How do I stop people pleasing? How do I finally put myself first? And those aren't bad questions because we'll address those as well. They're just not the first questions. Remember what we've been talking about through this video. Identity comes before behavior. Behavior is simply the expression of what we believe about ourselves. So before we change what you do, let's slow down and get curious about who you are. Notice I didn't say judge yourself. I didn't say criticize yourself. I didn't say compare yourself to who you used to be. I said get curious because curiosity creates understanding and understanding creates compassion. One of the biggest gifts you can ever give yourself is replacing self criticism with curiosity. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? Ask, what happened to me? Instead of saying, I should have figured this out by now, ask, what have I been carrying all these years? Instead of thinking, I've wasted so much time, ask, what has this season taught me about myself? Do you hear the difference? One conversation creates shame, the other creates understanding. And transformation has never grown well in shame, it grows in understanding. I think a lot of us imagine identity like it's something we're supposed to discover once and then we're done. Almost like finding a buried treasure, right? But that's never been my experience. And it's certainly not what I've seen with women I've coached. Identity isn't a destination, it's a relationship. Think about your closest friend. You didn't know everything about her the first day you met her. You learned her over time. You discovered what made her laugh, what made her cry, what she loved, what she avoided, what she dreamed about. Relationships grow through attention, not assumptions. So, why would your relationship with yourself be any different? If you spent years paying attention to everyone else, it makes perfect sense that your relationship with yourself feels distant. Relationships don't disappear because someone is bad. They drift because attention shifts. And for many women, your attention has been on everyone else but you. I want you to imagine standing in front of the mirror, not to critique your appearance, Not to point out everything you'd like to change, just to look. Really look. When was the last time you looked at yourself with curiosity instead of criticism? When was the last time you wondered, what does she need today? Instead of, what does everyone else need from her? That's a very different question. And if it feels uncomfortable, that's okay. Because discomfort isn't always a sign you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it's a sign you're doing something unfamiliar. Here is what I would love for you to do this week. Not because it's homework, not because you're trying to earn anything, but because every relationship begins with paying attention. I want you to set aside 10 quiet minutes. No phone, no television, no multitasking. Just you. And I want you to journal one question. Who am I when no one else is telling me who I need to be? Don't worry about getting the answer perfect. In fact, you may not have an answer at all, and that's okay because this isn't a test. It's the beginning of a conversation, and conversations take time. Write whatever comes to mind. What do you enjoy? What drains you? What energizes you? What have you missed? What have you been pretending not to miss? What have you always wanted to explore? Who were you before life became so busy? You don't have to solve your life this week. You just have to become curious again because that's where awareness begins. And awareness is where transformation happens, is where transformation begins. Can I leave you with one final thought? I don't believe you've disappeared. I believe you've been covered, covered by responsibilities, covered by expectations, covered by roles, covered by survival, covered by years of making sure everyone else was okay. But underneath all of that, the woman you were created to be is still there. She hasn't stopped existing. She's been waiting, waiting for you to notice her, waiting for you to become curious about her again, waiting for you to believe she's still worth knowing. So, if today stirred something inside of you, don't ignore it. Don't rush past it. Sit with it. Because I have a feeling this isn't the end of something. I think it's the beginning of remembering, the beginning of reconnecting, the beginning of becoming. And that's exactly why we started here. Not with your habits, not with your goals, not with your purpose, but with one simple question. Who am I? Because every life you build, every relationship you nurture, every purpose you live will always be limited by the identity you believe. And that's why today's Keisha's principle matters. You can't prioritize someone you've lost. But here's the beautiful news, you can reconnect with her one moment, one question, one intentional choice at a time. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love to know. In the comments, finish this sentence. I'm beginning to remember blank. Maybe it's something you've forgotten about yourself. Maybe it's a dream, a strength, a value. Or maybe all you're remembering today is that you matter too. Whatever it is, I'd love to read it. And if you know another woman who's been pouring into everyone else while quietly losing herself, share this video with her. She may not need another lecture about self care. She may simply need someone to remind her that she's still in there. If you're ready to keep walking this journey with me, make sure you subscribe because next week we're continuing this season with a conversation I think will answer the question many women have been carrying for years. And if you don't want to wait until next week, I've created Identity Clarity Workbook to help you begin reconnecting with yourself. The link is in the description and it's designed to help you start asking the kinds of questions to move you from confusion to clarity. Until next time, remember this, you don't have to become someone new. You simply have to reconnect with the woman you've always been. And I'll see you next week.